We are not here to discuss political misfortune or bad luck or the ebb and flow of business cycles. We are here to diagnose a fatal bug in the operating system of a continent. The stagnation of the Eurozone is not a glitch. It is a structural inevitability caused by a complete refusal to acknowledge physical reality. We are looking at a grotesque human experiment that forced incompatible biological entities, nations with distinct metabolic rates, to share a single stomach.
Well, that is an incredibly dark and frankly reductive way to open a discussion about the European project. I mean, you are describing the most ambitious peace project in human history as if it were a failed lab test. To call it a grotesque experiment ignores decades of integration, the removal of trade barriers, and the genuine economic rationale of the single market. This isn't biology, it is advanced macroeconomics designed to prevent war.
A family does not surgically attach the digestive tracts of its children together to prevent them from fighting. Let's define the failure immediately through the body and cage metaphor. The Eurozone is a system that locks distinct people into one cage. It forces them to have the exact same size stomach, the common currency, and the exact same heart rate, which is a single monetary policy set by the ECB. But the occupants of this cage are not identical.
No, they aren't identical. I grant you that. But the economic theory behind the euro is convergence. By sharing a currency, you eliminate exchange rate risk. This lowers the cost of borrowing for the smaller economies. For 20 years, countries like Italy and Greece could borrow at interest rates similar to Germany's. And that allowed for infrastructure investment, for modernization. It wasn't a cage, it was a stabilizer.
It was a trap, disguised as a stabilizer. It is a biological impossibility. You have a giant Germany with a high metabolic rate, massive muscle mass, and a need for immense caloric intake in the form of capital and resources. Then you have the roommates, the southern periphery, who have completely different physiological needs. In a natural environment, the roommates would eat at their own pace, they would digest at their own speed, using their own currency to adjust their metabolism. If they became less competitive, their currency would weaken, acting as an enzyme to help them digest global trade. But in this cage, the giant dictates the feeding schedule.
You're making it sound like Germany is intentionally harming the South. That is just, look, the German economy acts as an engine. It pulls the rest of the train. When the German engine is running hot, it generates credit and high-quality goods that the South can access. That's not starvation. That's shared prosperity and access to the world's best industrial output.
It is nutritional malfunction. When the giant eats, the roommates are force-fed the giant's production, but they lack the metabolic enzyme, their own currency devaluation, to digest it. The result is that the giant consumes the nutrients, the assets and the skilled labor, while the roommates are left with the waste product, which in this system is debt. The giant smiles and says, "We are one family," while physically occupying the refrigerator. The roommates cannot manage their own resource intake. They are forced to borrow money from the giant to buy the food the giant cooked. This isn't a union. It is a huge exploitation pump disguised as integration.
I reject this dehumanizing language. You're talking about sovereign democracies as if they're livestock. The struggles in the Eurozone, and I absolutely admit there are struggles, are friction. They are the growing pains of trying to align economies toward a unified ecological and social standard. It's not an exploitation pump. It's a construction project. We are building a common home where capital flows freely to where it is most efficient.
Let's analyze that home then. If you want to move away from biology to architecture, let's look at the blueprints of this common home. I call it the eco-mansion. The architects, the central planners, and core capital sold this concept as a high-tech building where everyone lives equally under a green roof.
And what is wrong with that ideal? A unified market allows for consistent regulations, environmental standards, and the free movement of goods. It creates a massive domestic market that can genuinely compete with the US and China.
The engineering is fraudulent. The blueprint reveals a hidden HVAC system. There are ducts installed in the basement and the lower floors where the periphery nations live that suck all the thermal energy, all the heat, up to the penthouse where the core resides.
That implies theft. The penthouse provides the capital to build the facility.
The heat rises because the ducts are designed to extract it. In this metaphor, heat is capital and labor. The residents in the basement are freezing. They are in an economic depression, with youth unemployment rates hovering near 30% in some regions. But here is the absurdity. The landlord charges the basement tenants for the electricity used to heat the penthouse. The debt burden of the South is essentially them paying for the privilege of having their resources extracted by the North. The penthouse residents sip their wine, looking at their smart meters, praising the building's energy efficiency, utterly oblivious to the fact that their comfort is thermodynamically stolen from the floors below.
You are describing a parasite, not an economy. But if that were true, why would the South stay? Why would they agree to this?
They stay because the penthouse offers protection. It offers the stability of the euro. Without that, they would be subject to volatile markets, hyperinflation, and massive capital flight. The penthouse provides the credit rating that keeps the rain off their heads.
They stay because the doors are locked from the outside. But let's go deeper into the mechanics of this extraction. You mentioned the penthouse provides. Let's look at the medical reality of that provision. I want to introduce the concept of the lion and the rabbit.
Another animal metaphor? Can we please stick to economics? It is necessary to understand the flow of fluids. Imagine a medical experiment where a scientist connects the blood vessels of a lion industrial power and a rabbit the South via a thick tube. The hypothesis is that by sharing blood, the currency, they will form one superorganism.
In a sense, yes. That is the theory of the optimal currency area. The liquidity flows to where it is needed, balancing out shocks. If one area is weak, capital flows in to support it.
Physics dictates flow. The lion has a massive heart, a powerful industrial pump. It beats with such pressure that it physically sucks the blood out of the rabbit. The rabbit enters a state of severe anemia. It is fainting. It is dying. But the scientists, the bureaucrats in Brussels, are looking at a monitor that shows the total blood volume of the two animals combined.
And the total volume is stable. That's the GDP of the Eurozone. As a bloc, the Eurozone is incredibly wealthy.
The scientists clap. They say the system is stable. The experiment is a success. Meanwhile, the rabbit is in cardiac arrest. The stability of the aggregate data masks the necrosis of the individual components. The system is designed to maximize the ledger, not to preserve the life of the participants.
Look, I think you are completely ignoring the safety nets. We have the ECB, we have the ESM. It's not just a raw connection of blood vessels. There are valves. There are checks and balances to prevent exactly this kind of anemia you're talking about.
The valves were removed when they signed the treaties. Let's talk about those checks and balances. Let's look at the specific financial mechanism that proves the extraction. Target 2.
Target 2 is just the Trans-European Automated Real-Time Gross Settlement Express Transfer System. It is back-end plumbing for central banks to settle payments. It creates a balance sheet. It is hardly a weapon.
It is the scoreboard of a casino where you cannot win. Let's explain what it actually represents. When a Greek consumer buys a German car, money moves from Greece to Germany. In a normal economy with sovereign currencies, the Greek currency would drop in value due to the outflow, making German cars more expensive next time, and the trade would balance. That is the safety valve. In the Eurozone, that valve is soldered shut.
Which prevents competitive devaluation. It stops a race to the bottom where nations destroy their purchasing power just to sell cheap goods. That's stability. It's a feature. It's not a bug.
It creates a race to the grave. Because the currency cannot adjust, the imbalance just sits there. Target 2 records it. The House Germany holds nearly 1 trillion euros in credits. The players, the South, hold equal debt. The players are locked inside the casino. They have run out of chips. In a real world, they would leave the table. Here, the House lends them more chips on interest just so they can keep buying dinner from the House's kitchen.
But as long as the system is solvent on the books, it functions. You call it a casino, I call it a credit union. The imbalances are just temporary account entries. The Bundesbank knows that money is technically safe within the system.
It is not temporary. It is cumulative. It is a straight-line extraction system. A circular economy implies that waste becomes food, that resources return to the source. This system is linear. Resources flow up and north, debt flows down and south. It maximizes ledger blacking for the north while ignoring the survival costs of the south. The silence you hear from the markets isn't stability. It's the silence of a player who has realized the game is rigged but has a gun to their head.
Even if I were to grant you that the internal balance is stressed, you are missing the bigger picture. The Eurozone is a global powerhouse. Germany is an export machine. That strength anchors the entire system. You can't deny the industrial might of the core. Volkswagen, Siemens, BASF. That is real wealth, not just ledger entries. As long as that engine runs, the system survives.
That anchor is gone. You are looking at a ghost. The giant in the cage is currently dying because its life support has been severed. The business model of German industry was based on two specific pillars, neither of which exist anymore.
German industry is undergoing a transition, yes, but saying it's dying is absurd hyperbole. They are retooling.
Let's look at the inputs. The giant was doping. For decades, the German industrial machine, and by extension the Eurozone economy, was fed by a specific drug, cheap Russian energy. This was the opium. The chemical plants of BASF, the steel mills, the heavy manufacturing, the IV drip was hooked directly into the giant's veins. It allowed for high production at artificially low costs. That tube has been physically ripped out.
We are pivoting to renewables. We are building LNG terminals. That is the moral choice. We detached from Russia to stand for sovereignty. That is a cost we are willing to pay to modernize our energy grid.
A cost you cannot afford. You cannot run a heavy chemical industry on solar panels in a Berlin winter. But look at the other side of the equation. The giant had an external stomach. It didn't digest its own food. It vomited its production into China. The Chinese market absorbed the German cars, the machinery, the chemicals. But the pig China has closed its mouth.
Markets fluctuate. China is cooling down, but trade continues. We are still selling them specialized machinery.
Pig now makes its own enzymes. China produces its own EVs. BYD is outcompeting Volkswagen in China and soon in Europe. They produce their own high-tech machinery. They do not need the giant's old technology. So now, the giant is trapped in the cage. The opium is gone. The external stomach is sewn shut. The result is a backup of excrement, unsold goods. We are seeing industrial constipation on a continental scale. Deindustrialization is not a policy choice. It is the inevitable result of the organism failing to metabolize.
Look, I understand the economic headwinds, but Europe is about more than just selling cars to China. We are pivoting to a higher strategy. We are the moral leaders of the world. We are fighting for the planet. We are implementing the Green Deal, ESG standards, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. We are setting the rules for the future of humanity. That is our new value proposition, regulatory superpower.
That is the sinking ship strategy.
Excuse me? That is a strategic play to dominate the clean tech sector.
Imagine the Titanic. The ship is taking on water. That's the economic collapse we just described. The hull is breached. Instead of fixing the hull, the captains, the elites, are seizing the lifeboats. And while they do this, they are yelling at the passengers in steerage for breathing too hard and emitting too much CO2.
That is a deeply cynical twist on environmental responsibility. We are trying to save the biosphere. If we tax carbon at the border, we force the rest of the world to clean up their act. It's leverage.
You are engaging in the new piracy. Let's compare the conquistadors of the 16th century to the ESG auditors of the 21st.
You cannot compare a genocidal colonial expansion to environmental regulation. That is highly offensive. We are trying to stop the planet from burning.
The interface has changed. The back-end code is identical. The old pirates used Bibles and cannons. They landed in the New World, declared the locals heathens, and stole their gold. The new pirates use laptops and ESG scorecards. They land in the global south, declare the locals carbon emitters, and steal their resources.
We aren't stealing resources. We are incentivizing sustainable practices. We are telling them, if you want to sell to us, you must meet our standards. That is market power.
You are seizing the assets. The carbon border tax is a mechanism to devalue the production of the South. By declaring their factories and farms dirty by European standards, you force them to buy indulgences, carbon credits from you, or you levy fines. It is a trick to seize the global South's water, soil, and rare earth minerals under the guise of saving the planet. It creates a toll booth on the world's economy where Europe collects the rent because it wrote the rulebook.
But we have to do something.
People are literally dying from climate change. We have to use our economic power to force a change. If we don't lead, who will?
You use the crisis to justify the extraction. The system sacrifices human survival costs to maintain the financial system. When the European elite buys up farmland in Africa to protect nature or offset their own emissions, they are removing the local population's ability to feed themselves. It is the eco-mansion metaphor expanded to a global scale. The global south becomes the basement. You extract their resources to keep the lights on in the European penthouse, and you pat yourselves on the back for being green while they starve.
But if we don't have these rules, if we don't have this vision, what do we have? You're tearing down everything. The currency, the trade model, the moral standing. The people of Europe believe in this. They believe they are doing good. You are describing a villain, but I see a desperate attempt to hold on to civilization.
The silence of the masses is not agreement. It is not belief. It is a defense mechanism. When a human being is placed in a cage, starved of nutrition, and told by the loudspeaker that they are in the most luxurious resort in the world, they eventually shut down. They focus on survival. The lack of riots, the lack of revolution. It is not consent. It is the paralysis of a population that is being physically drained of the energy required to resist. They are paying the survival costs of a system that views them as batteries, not citizens.
I refuse to accept that this is the end. We can reform this. We can loosen the fiscal rules. We can engage in genuine technology transfers. We can make the cage into a true home. There is always a path to fix the machine if the will is there. We just need to remember the human element.
The human element is exactly what the machine consumes to keep running. There is no compromise here. This is a theoretical execution.
What does that even mean?
It means the current operating system, linear accumulation within the Eurozone framework, is physically checkmate. You cannot reform a system designed to extract. It was built to move wealth from the periphery to the core and from the earth to the ledger. Now that the external inputs, Russia and China, are gone, the machine has no choice but to cannibalize its own population. The transition to a true circular economy, one that prioritizes the physical survival cost of the organism over the financial maintenance of the system, is not an ideology. It is not a political slogan. It is the only rational investment to avoid extinction. The ledger must burn so the organism can breathe. The experiment is over. The only question is how many more casualties the scientists will demand before they turn off the monitor.
But you can't just...
The logic is absolute.